2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Delusions of Grandeur. I am one of your hosts, but today we're gonna go on and about a very interesting animation film. But Brandon or Jake, which one of you wanted to go ahead and give this an introduction?
Well, I'll go ahead since it was since I originally was trying to get this one up here. And this is the Cowboy Bebop movie, which did actually, which takes place, of course, during the series, which is kind of a cool return to the world of Bebop. And this was done in 1990-ish. Oh, wait, that's the series.
The movie is 01.
Yeah, the movie's 01. Sorry, it just, the page crashed and then pushed me back to the original one. But this movie is a very cool way of revisiting 2001 with, of course, a return of Watanabe back to his roots in this amazing series. For those people who, of course, loved their adventures on board with our pals from yesterday, will be delighted to find the return trip here as they fight a terrorist, seemingly, getting ready to threaten a global pandemic. Kind of apt in a way to current times.
In a way, yes. In a way.
Now, before we go onward, and I know that because I know that Dave wanted to finish watching the film, but Jake, you said you had a few things you needed to go over before about the original series that you felt like you needed to do.
Yeah, well, for one thing, we had a couple of points that I meant to make yesterday that we didn't. So for those of you who didn't, who are just tuning in now, who didn't catch our discussion on our channel, Septum Sin versus the World, we went on about the series Cowboy Bebop. So definitely want to check that out. But 2 points that I meant to make about the ending that we didn't get around to. And one, I kind of borrowed it, but I kind of like this interpretation, and I think it's a good one. Of the main core cast, you could say Ed and Ein are relatively free. They come and go as they please. They are not exactly prisoners to their past, but the other three are. The other three are all prisoners to their past. And I saw it put out that all three of them make a different choice in those final 2 episodes. Spike chooses to confront his past head on. Faye chooses to leave it in the past. And Jet chooses not to choose. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, again, it reflects the characters quite well.
Yeah. So I just thought that was a really cool way of looking at it. But another observation I really wanted to make, especially because this was more my observation, I did talk about how when Ed left, it was a great moment. Just overall, it was just a great moment. Not because Ed left, but just like, again, you get that. It's the only time where she shows any form of sadness in the entire series. And it's like she's kind of wistful for what she's leaving behind. But you also get the feeling that she knows the three of them have those hard choices coming. And so there's probably a little bit of sadness for them too. But one point I meant to point out is that Ed leaves at the end of Hard Luck Woman. Other than a throwaway comment from Faye, Ed and Ein are at that point gone from the series. And with her, Ed takes the levity. She takes the comedy. She takes pretty much from there on, the last two, the Real Folk Blues are hardcore neo-noir. So So I really like that. I like the idea that even though there was comedy before Ed, when she goes, she takes it with her. And I just thought that was a really interesting way to set up the final act. And yeah, so couple observations we didn't quite get to. Like I said, if you got any thoughts on that, feel free to throw it out.
I got to most of what I wanted to say when it came
Okay.
to the series that time.
Well, another thing we didn't really do, and I guess there you go, Dave.
He might have just signed on. It's probably finishing.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, we didn't really cover our favorite moments, scenes, episodes, did we?
We did. It's just we didn't cover it the way that we did. Because when we were talking about
it was more scattered throughout.
Episodes, it was like, these are my favorite episodes. These are my favorite episodes. Those were, like I mentioned, the one where you had Poirot. This was there. And, of course, the mushroom episode.
Oh, yeah. That was great. I think probably my single favorite moment was probably the one where Ed rolled over in her sleep and ate the space creature.
I believe that was one of the first episodes I watched on DVD.
Right.
Because I remember with Brittany showing that one because it was at her apartment. We'd watch anime at her apartment. You were, I don't think you visited the apartment a couple of times at that place.
This is the one where the infamous chili occurred, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I was there once or twice. Actually, I think that was my first One Piece encounter, I think, was at that apartment. Showed me. We saw the introduction of Brooke in, I think, another episode.
Oh, yeah, I was introduced to a lot of cool shows. Azumanga Daioh. Gosh, what was that one? The Other Slice of Life. Gosh, it's the one with the that has the kind of cheerleader opening.
A Lucky Star.
Lucky Star, yeah. I was first introduced to that because George and one of and his friend were there at the time, and they were watching that. And George was saying, "This doesn't appeal to me," and I was like, "Ooh, look at the pretty colors!" And I had to go.
Right.
But we'll go ahead and just get sort of started with the movie.
Yep.
So, was this your first time watching this film?
It wasn't.
I know, but for the purposes of the people watching.
Right. Well, okay, so we'll go ahead. I'm going to do the relatively short version if I can. But as we mentioned a little bit last night, and definitely on our earlier episode for Maverick, this was one that you showed me at the end of the series. Like, we had watched the series, and then we capped it off with the movie, and we paired the movie with Maverick, and it was an awesome pairing, and it was just good times. But this time around was, I think, my third time, because kind of like with the series, I had picked up the movie. I have like this, kind of this bare bones edition that Sony put out, 4 or 5 years ago. And I guess the Steelbook has better stuff on it. I kind of wish I got that. But anyway.
It has some extras, but...
yeah, this one has no extras that I could tell, which is annoying. But it still looks good. I think it was the first release of any Bebop in this country on Blu-ray, if I remember correctly. And it looks phenomenal. So this was, I think, my second time seeing the movie on this edition. But this time, I do want to let the audience know specifically, the movie supposedly takes place between Session 22, Cowboy Funk, and Session 23, Brain Scratch. The movie takes place between them. And actually, I didn't realize this, and I need to go back and look for it. Supposedly, Cowboy Andy does make a cameo in the movie. But it's so that kind of helps place where it is, I guess, in the series. But it's a fun movie. It's definitely a lot longer, being 2 hours. It's about the length of 4 episodes, but they tell basically one story. So it is kind of like the series had those two-parters. This one's kind of like the two-parters put together almost. And like you said, it does center on that one, basically this terrorist and another individual who's a hacker who's related, along for the ride. And it pretty much, if I remember correctly, all the action takes place on Mars in this one, right?
Yep, pretty much. And I do think, I mean, this was not my first time watching it either. Right. Matter of fact, I had not actually heard of the movie until after I had started collecting anime, and got a hold of it, and I thought, this is cool, more Bebop. And I was surprised when it took place earlier in the series, but in a way, I actually liked watching it after I finished the series, because after that dour ending that takes place at the end of the series, which, if you want those spoilers, you can get them by watching our episode of Anime Anticlimax. And you get through it?
Not entirely, but I'll finish it later. I just got to the crop duster scene, so
okay.
You're pretty close.
Yeah, You're probably like 15 minutes away or something like that. But so with that being said, I was glad to kind of come back to it, because there was such a sour taste at the end that I was so glad to be able to get back with the crew again in its entirety, and just even if it was just for one more romp, because that was just a great in general.
And if you think about it, this is kind of their last big romp as a crew, because the only post episode that really features all of them is Brain Scratch. And that one was more of a trippy, sort of weird. It wasn't as big of this action-heavy kind of adventure like the movie was.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, what about you, Dave? Was this your first time watching it? Well, I guess it was.
You got your mute on. Yeah.
Yeah, it was my first time watching it, and I'm still watching it. So, seeing that this in a film type form is always a little bit different than a series form, because it's got better coloring. It's got better. You can tell from this remix thing that the coloring is definitely newer than the coloring that was on the series. So seeing it in like bright ass colors, the very beginning scene in the convenience store, that was kind of great.
I can imagine it was a difference for you, since you've got the show on DVD before it was remastered. That was probably a heck of a difference. Yeah. I was watching the remastered Blu-ray, and I noticed the difference in quality.
Well, if you want, we can throw out a little bit about the characters before, so you can try and catch up at the end. So the characters, most of them are pretty much. And if you want more in-depth talk about the main characters, do check out our discussion, because we spent a lot of time on those characters. So I'm just
shameless self-promotion.
That's a good one. Septum Sin versus the World. We don't do a lot of updates lately, so it'll be easy to find at this point. So I'm just going to run through the main Bebop crew real quick. Of course, you've got Spike, who is a just kind of this. What was the word? Freelance
bounty hunter
guy who is a kind of like a. He's kind of like a combination of a Bruce Lee and maybe a Clint Eastwood. man with no name type guy in a lot of ways, with a little bit of wisecracking, maybe Jackie Chan thrown in there.
Well, again, he is loosely modeled on Lupin the Third. You could almost think Lupin the Third by way of Dirty Harry, by way of Bruce Lee. Yeah, that's a good way.
And then you've got, of course, Jet Black, which we had discussed as the kind of gruff guy who holds almost all the group together. And he's an ex-police officer.
I almost feel that Jet Black's voice is a little bit different, or is it the same person?
In the movie? I think it's the same actor. But are you watching English or Japanese? Well, either way, it's the same.
I'm watching in English.
They're the same. It's the same voice cast for either one.
Okay.
So,
it just seems gruffer and deeper.
Well, it is a few years later. So.
Right.
But then, of course, you have Faye Valentine, our femme fatale of the group, who is notoriously unlucky. And then, of course, finally, the comedic elements, as Jake was talking about earlier, where you have Ein, the data dog, and Ed, or Radical Edward, as she likes to be known, the hacker.
Or Edward Wonghall Pepelu Tevruski the Fourth.
François.
Or François Epideli, yes.
So those are the main ones that we follow. But of course, any movie like this, of course, they're also defined by the villains. And this one has one heck of a villain to it. I do not remember. You get all those names. You remember all the names.
Vincent Volaju.
And of course, he has a hacker of his own that travels with him for a good portion of the movie. And before we start getting into any plot lines, spoilers incoming. And then, of course, there's also a female operative that is related in some way to our major villain,
Elektra.
So what did y'all think of the main villain cast? Like I said, we spent a long time discussing what we thought about the others, but what did you think of this villainous cast?
Go ahead.
It reminds me as if who played Lex Luthor in the Spider-Man films? Was it Eisman or
Lex Luthor in the Spider-Man films?
Or what?
That's an interesting
not
crossover.
Spider-Man. The guy who played on the Social Network, and guy who played on the Social Network, and
you're talking about the hacker guy,
Eisenberg.
Eisenberg. Yeah.
Because I wouldn't put the main villain as
just you put Eisenberg as a hacker, except he has different colored skin.
Or is the main hacker? I guess I could see that.
He has
the other guy.
He's playing a video game. He's playing a video game when we first come across him, because Faye is, in fact, she finds him at an arcade place, and as she shoots the arcade, and he's like, "Dude, you shouldn't piss off the whatever he called himself."
I like his first reaction was, "Man, I was so close to whatever he was like, I was so close." And it's like he doesn't even turn around. The person just fired a gun. He's just like, I was so close.
So it would have been. I do feel like there was a missed opportunity of having him and Ed face off, like fully on.
Yeah, they could have done that. The basically one thing I do want to say, that was a fun character in a way. I did like him a little bit as a character. The big bad, Vincent, I was fascinated to find out. One thing that's important to know about the movie is it is known here as Cowboy Bebop, the movie. But the original subtitle Tengoku no Tabira, I guess, translates literally to, but the original song subtitle was, we were talking about the sessions have song titles. This one was called Knocking on Heaven's Door, which is notable not only as a pretty kick-ass Bob Dylan song, but one of the very few songs where there are two covers that are better known than the original, and all three are considered classics. That's kind of crazy. But it's even weirder then that they bitched out on the title, because you already have these two fascinating covers. Why would they care so much about the rights issues? But apparently they were deeply concerned about the rights issues, so they were like, we'll just call it the movie. But one thing that's fascinating about Vincent that I didn't really pick up on it watching the movie, but then when I thought about it, I was like, I can see this. And you definitely can see it in his look. But supposedly he is partially based on Bob Dylan. Like Shinichirō Watanabe thought that it would be interesting to have a Dylan-type character in this role. And he does look a little bit like him. So it's interesting.
What's odd is that for some reason he reminded me of Zangetsu from Bleach, which is he almost carried himself like a tight Kaipo character. He was a
he did look like
he was a very kind of cool character. Very for a villain, you could tell he had that singular purpose.
Right.
And like all the villains and just all the characters in Bebop, there are really very few that I would consider just 2D. They're all like they all have some sort of depth to them. Right. So he did have his depth. He did have his story, and the relation that he had to a lot of the other characters, his actions, it really did come across to me as a very threatening yet interesting individual.
And Vincent, in his backstory, if I remember correctly, he comes from the battle of of what they call Titan, or whatever, and he's like supposedly should have died, but he was supposedly like one of the only survivors. Well,
the unit was mostly wiped out.
Apparently, Spike has a similarity where I thought they said that Spike was a survivor of the Titan Wars too.
I think so, but he had nothing to do with this particular unit.
No, but I wanted to note that contrast, that they had both survived the war.
The Titan Wars was kind of like the Vietnam conflict, or a stand-in to that, in my opinion. It felt like that throughout the series, because most of the characters had been touched by it in one way or another. I mean, Vicious was very much in one of those types of units. They utilized the soldiers as experiments, which you got to see in Vietnam with them testing the LSD on our own soldiers, or Agent Orange, for instance. I mean, things like that. So these are kind of reflections, I think, of Vietnam when you talk about the war on Titan.
Right.
Okay. And why don't we get into the plot itself, since we hit those characters? And the plot's pretty simplistic on the surface, because they're hunting down this bounty on this person, which is what brings them to the planet. And it turns out that he has gotten a hold of this gene-engineered disease and these little marbles, which he plays Chinese checkers with.
Well, they were hunting the hacker, and Faye was tracking him when she gets caught up in an explosion.
Lee Sampson. That's what she was.
Lee Sampson. Yeah, and
which turns out that he's goes under a different name or something like that, right?
Right. So basically, yeah, you have this great big explosion on a bridge that flat out kills several people, but
And this
then
was on
people start falling. Yeah, and then Faye sees Vincent, who she comes to find out is Vincent, and then he disappears. But then people suddenly start dropping ill, and dying from this mysterious ailment. And I do like when Faye returns to the Bebop, and she's like, "You would never believe what? Yeah, there it is. It's on the news." And it was like, I think right then they said something about this virus, and everyone backed away from her.
Now, it's interesting with Bebop. I've noticed one thing about the series is that race is very fluid in the series. More so than anything. You don't really see an aspect of racism or any of that, but that's because people change their races and appearances at will. People are getting fat injections, or like even the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar character. When you look at the original character they were hunting, he was a white guy.
Yeah.
So you really.
And that little dude that Spike accosted in the pet store that he thought was that guy, because he's like, "You keep changing your appearance," but I think he said something like he traded down the time. Yeah.
Again, it's a very interesting how fluid that is in that series. So it's kind of an interesting idea. I guess when anybody can be anybody. But what's the point of trying to look at things that way? It's become more of a cyberpunk dystopian
almost like an avatar like substance that they can acquire when they're on the different universes. I was thinking something in parallel to like Ready Player One type of thing, where they can just end up being whoever the heck they want, whether downgrading or upgrading or whatnot as they go. And because this is a world of bounty hunters and SS the police characters and whatnot, you kind of have cowboys and Indians and whatnot set into the mix. I mean, look at when Vincent shot Spike. He goes down and gets found by Nantucket there. So,
well, one thing though that is very much the Blade Runner-esque or any of these dystopian-esques when it comes to the plot line is usually all the crap is caused by the elites essentially toying with just with those that are in the lower classes. And usually a lot of these things involve the lower classes basically saying, well, screw you, and turning it on its head. And this was the case with the disease, because it was created through this company. It was the company, I believe, was behind the original genetic testing in the first place, or had a hand in it. So
Charius Medical Pharmaceutical Company.
And it's a pharmaceutical company could be corrupt in any way.
Well, and like there, we mentioned Elektra. She ends up being an ally, but she's pretty much like the chief of security, if I understood correctly, at this medical building. And she's a former comrade in arms with Vincent in this elite military unit. And she comes face to face. I like the way Spike snuck in there and the way he was trying to pass himself off as a janitor, like anyone would believe that. And but then they end up in a pitched battle with each other. He ends up leaving in a hail of gunfire from all the people chasing him out. And she, of course, is like suitably impressed with his skill, but he is suitably impressed. He goes back. He's like, they have way too much security for a medical outfit. And it's like, yeah, they kind of do. They're up to some shady goings on there. Although apparently she wasn't as she wasn't as aware of that as I understood, because she might have been
Yeah,
less
well, I think.
willing to change sides.
Well, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those things. She wasn't at that pay grade.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's just there. But yeah, that guy was definitely some bad news. I mean, he kills his like partner in crime, and his plot. I don't know if any of y'all got this, but his plot at the end of the movie reminded me so much of the ending plot the Joker had for the Keaton Batman movie, where you had all the parade floats, and each of the floats had the virus in it, so it's going to spray all the people during this parade.
Apparently, that's the part where Andy makes his appearance on. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Like these great big gaudy, like they have this big Halloween parade, which I like the idea that on Mars, Halloween gets what's essentially a Macy's Day parade. I like that idea. But
and it sets up some pretty epic standoffs. You got the standoff you were talking about there. There's the standoff in the train, which involves Spike and the other two that we were talking about earlier, where Spike nearly bites it. And of course, then you have a dogfight scene with Spike chasing after. And you have that final standoff between the main character and the main villain, which ends in quite the which ends with a defining moment from the villain himself, which was kind of cool. And he shows it twice, or maybe even 3 times. He shows that he does have some humanity, that he's not just some kind of monster, which you think of him as almost as you're going through, because he's like, I don't give a crap.
I think this is kind of the Dylan connection. He does feel, in a sense, he is kind of, you could almost say a philosopher. He is trying to find answers, and he just has a very messed up way of looking for them.
I don't know. I feel like Vincent is the kind of a character where he has this brainwashed quality to him. You know, like he was. His mind was controlled to the point where at one point in time he like believed in a cause, and it's like he went out west to Asia and he found himself, and now he's like kind of an age-old hippie with his ideas and whatnot. To me.
Okay.
I feel like he is set in his mind where he's just not that far from being like crazy, you know.
See, I would look at him as more of almost a Killmonger type character, which of course it's very sad about the death that happened with that.
Yes.
But
let's just go ahead and take a moment and say R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman. We didn't do that last night.
He was an amazing actor and amazing person, and those don't usually go hand in hand, as we've seen with Kevin Spacey.
Right.
Just to name one, But in any case, I felt like he has a similar quality of like the world has basically screwed him to the point where he wants the world to burn. And this really defines the character, because everything that he had was taken from him.
And as Elektra said she while she was in the jail cell or in the cell with Spike. She said that he had never had anyone that loved him, even when he was born.
Yeah.
Yeah, that he had spent his whole life alone.
And that is a sad thing, but that's the perfect recipe for wanting the world to burn, because when you feel like everything and anything that you have loved, or those few things that you have loved, have been taken away from you, who cares about the rest?
Well, and again, though, this is part of where I was coming from, where I think he was a little bit of a philosopher. He was looking for a meaning for it all, and I think that was he did. And you like you said, you did express one fairly intriguing scene that we mentioned. I guess when I think someone mentioned they offed his partner in crime, but Faye had tracked Lee to a particular spot, and Lee was, I believe, killed by the very same thing that the guy was getting ready to release on the world.
Oh yeah,
and he basically ended up taking Faye prisoner for a while, and he does do some villain monologuing in her presence.
but yeah, that concept though that he does, that was one of, like I say, 3 areas where you can see that he's kind of shown mercy, and it was the only time that he showed mercy to somebody other than his former comrade, who he showed that he doesn't even fully remember at the time until the very end.
Yes,
and at the very end, you can see where they're at that standoff, and they both fire, and well, she thinks they both fire, but she's really the only one who takes the shot, and that is to me, that was an impressive ending. You probably haven't reached it yet, Dave, but you already said you don't care about spoilers, so
no.
And so you won't care when I say it's a kind of a nice what do I want to say? A nice nod to the end of the actual series in a way.
Yes.
Yeah. But
again, it's kind of cool to see it. Those and when we get to the production value, it can definitely all that stands through. But were there any other pieces of the plot? I did find that it was great that they incorporated the 3 older gentlemen in that.
Yes, the 3 older gentlemen. That's what we'll know them as, I guess. They are. I wonder if they're intended. We didn't even mention this last night. I wonder if they're intended to be the 3 amigos that far into the future. You could almost see that. Like I could see the one on the middle of the road being probably the Steve Martin character, and the one who's a real jerk could be this Chevy Chase character, and the one who's not entirely there could be the Martin Short character.
I do like how they even say it. There's like when they're just like sitting there talking about we're kidding. Of course we know what we're doing. Bye, and you can tell it's almost like they're in on the joke that they're throwing out there.
Right. But they finally get to see some action during that whole crop dusting scene. I did like that part where the planes start taking off and Spike's like, "Are these all going to fly?" What? Yeah, of course. Well, maybe.
Oh, well, actually, it was Jeff Black who was saying, "Are these all going to fly?"
Oh, right. Was that was
because there was a 2-pronged plan between him and Faye.
Right.
Faye was she was getting it to change the weather to have it rain, and spread the antidote throughout, and that was the way that they were to combat it.
We did get a nice little faraway glance at Faye's top half in the room. Though I did want to point that out. I mean, it was a faraway glance, but it was enough to, give a man some view.
Yeah.
That's part of her purpose.
And she was, and then right after that, she was like, "I hope no peeping Tom comes by." And I was thinking to myself, "Well, aren't we then the peeping Tom?"
Oh, yeah.
The one thing about the plot that I felt was sad, And like I said, when I brought it up about what potential there could be, just like the series, I feel like Ein and Ed were radically underused. They weren't even used all that much for the comedic effect. They were just kind of there. You just knew that they were there.
Yeah, there wasn't much going on with them. Yeah,
and it does make me sad because I mean, Ein is meant to be a background character that adds a little bit of color, but Ed really was a character that I felt like was wasted on the series and in the movie when you could have had a lot more. Like I said, you could have had a fight between her and the hacker. I think that they did an okay job in kind of subverting expectations. Because in a typical Japanese anime that's a shonen series movie, they would match them up like that. That would be how they would go about the fights. Like, Spike would have faced off against the main villain, of course. Faye would have faced off against the security guard woman. And of course, Ed would have faced off against the hacker, and that's how they would have done it. And Jet would obviously do nothing because I didn't have a plot for him. But, but that's the idea. When you're looking at that sort of thing, they usually try and, like, every single one of them gets a slight bit of a chance to shine.
Or maybe they would have had some sort of subplot where the Sharios was actually government, like a big part of the government, and Jet would have his opportunity to fight government corruption or something like that.
Oh yeah, maybe something to do with his connections with the police.
Right.
And
exactly.
And in a way, I'm not sure whether I'm happy or sad. I am kind of sad though that Ed was not present as much in this as she could have been.
Yeah, that was sad.
Because Ed could have easily matched that guy's skill.
Oh yeah.
So that would have been fun. Matter of fact, you could have had a pretty intense. That would have been something unique. An action hacking battle back in 2001. That would have been really cool.
Right. I mean, it's hardly unique now. I mean, that's kind of the entire plot of Summer Wars. But
that's it in 2001, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to see lots of that. I mean, that and Fractal, which is more like what Dave was talking about, where nobody leaves their house and they're all just their avatars online.
True.
Which I am sad that series didn't get rated any higher than it was. It had a lot of potential.
Well, that's the thing. I think it had a lot of potential and didn't really deliver as much as people hoped, but it's still pretty good. It'd be a good one for us to hit eventually.
Oh, yeah. To me, it was much like Nadia. It kind of reminded me of what Studio Ghibli would do with a TV series. And then they decided to do Ronya, and that really subverted my expectations. But with that being said, let's talk production value.
Yeah.
I mean, this film was beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Coming off the heels of watching the series in Blu-ray already, which was an amazing set with action and the smoothness of the movements and all that, and the movie took it up just to a whole new level.
Well, and this one wasn't done in space all that much entirely. It was mostly done on the planet's surface of Mars.
Right.
For the most part. So it instead ended up being more of a Star Trek episode, where
a very high action Star Trek.
Yeah, a very high action Star Trek episode where everything dealing with this whole pharmaceutical company is on the surface of this of the planet Mars. It's not your Total Recall Mars, but it is Mars. So
right, it's a properly colonized Mars. I mean, they really have turned it into certain scenes you wouldn't even know you're in space. I mean, you'd
almost think that you were in Agrabah, but
I don't know about that, but yeah, the production values are pretty stellar with this one. Like I said, I watched it in its supposed proper place, and watching it between two episodes definitely helped highlight the differences. But even so, it also helped highlight how high the production values for the series were, because you get a movie with this level of production value on your typical anime, and it would have been night and day. I mean, this one was more like night and dusk. It was a little bit, it was a difference, but it wasn't like, mind-numbingly crazy in there. They did. I don't know if y'all agree. I didn't really notice the use of CG as much as I did in the series, so that was probably better integrated overall.
I think. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, they had a lot more money.
Well, yeah.
Not that the series was like starved for money. This isn't gay next we're talking here.
You're right.
But it's still I really do think that this did very well when it came to money wise. I think they knew what they were dealing with here hit wise.
Right.
So I don't think they had problems finding investment. It was it just everything production wise was just at tip top. Well, even the Ava movies were much higher production quality, especially End of Ava. If you want to brave yourself watching that.
Of course, they're nothing compared to the current Ava movies, but
Well, yeah, but you compare it to the series.
Well, yeah.
At that time.
Right.
And I haven't watched the other ones because I'm waiting on the last one because I still have to see whether it will even come out in the United States. That'd be
Well, I'm sure it will eventually. No, why is that? I don't want that.
But I do. So, do y'all have anything that y'all wanted to put elsewise on the production value?
Well,
I just want to say one thing. I feel like Ed is like the Alpha 5 of the group, because he's the go-to computer genius when it comes to finding things like certain profiles that they can't get past, like military profiles that may have been like blacklisted or whatnot. And I think that's why they were able to find out what they were on Vincent's past and whatnot. So, so I feel like very much as the Power Rangers Alpha 5, that's what he kind of reminds me of.
That's less annoying than Alpha 5, but I can understand that concept.
The one completely random bit about this that's interesting per IMDb, they could be wrong about this, but IMDb lists that this made just over $1 million in the US and a little over $3 million worldwide. That's almost unheard of for an anime to make that much relative to what's worldwide amount. Usually it makes a pittance in the US relative to what it actually makes. So that's interesting. That shows how the international popularity was definitely there.
Well,
what's that?
Especially since piracy is still out there. So seeing that hasn't really affected the worldwide viewage of this animation film is.
One could say that about any film, though. I mean, Star Wars and say, well, I'm surprised it makes so much at the box office because they could just pirate it. But yeah,
Right.
In fact, it's even easier to pirate those films because they're such in high demand. Those are there.
This also did come out in the US in 2003, which made it before the current heyday of anime releases. It would have had a fairly limited release at best scenario. But one thing that probably hurt the overall worldwide, specifically, well, no, that wouldn't have had much effect worldwide. But an interesting thing is that this came out very shortly we mentioned the series was affected by the events of 9/11.
Oh,
the
yeah.
movie was a little too, because it came out right before. Like it came out September 1, I think it was that year in Japan. But another thing on the production values, of course, is the music. You can't talk about this without the music.
Oh, yeah.
And this
Well,
one
yeah.
actually,
Oh,
this
Are
one
we
actually.
ready to move on from
Oh,
all the animation and
oh,
stuff to the music?
I'm sorry.
We were. That's why I gave it a section.
Okay.
Did you have anything else otherwise about the animation style, color, setting, anything like that that we need to hit before we hit the music? We've been moving at a good clip, but
Oh, really? Yeah.
Not really.
but yes, now you can go ahead. Go
Okay.
fly. My
It is interesting that they didn't really use either of the main themes from the series, but they did bring back the seatbelts to handle a large portion of the music. Uh, in fact, one of them, the ending theme, is called "Not Gotta Knock a Little Harder," is the seatbelts featuring Mayamane, so it's the same team with the original Ender, Real Folk Blues. But they've got multiple songs, and it's really great. I mean, again, the music in this series just kicks so much ass, and the movie's no exception. I wish I had the soundtrack.
I mean, DNA to me that was the perfect starting soundtrack that this movie needed.
Right.
Again, it sets the stage. The music itself in Cowboy Bebop has always been a character in and of itself, and it is an awesome character. It really hits the whole plot line home, in my opinion.
Right.
What do you think, Dave, of the music that you've seen? You haven't heard the end theme, but I know you've heard the opening theme that they have.
Is it different than the series?
Oh yeah,
very much. I mean, the actual song they're talking about that.
I was trying to focus on the movie more than listening to the music, I guess, because it was my first time watch. But what I heard of it, I liked it. I think I even like it better than the series music that they have, because it seemed like in the very beginning they had a different theme, and then they changed it up halfway through or whatnot. I think.
Well, I mean, the themes of the show changed a little bit more often. Not the opening and enders, but throughout. But they always had a similar vibe to them. Whereas this movie was just really one basic theme that went through, but there were a lot of cool songs. I mean, I'm looking here at the soundtrack list, and of course you've got, your opener and ender, but you also have 4 insert songs, which are pretty impressive. I must admit, I agree though, Dave. Sometimes I don't always hear the soundtrack fully the first time I'm going through. And if I'm watching it in sub, I definitely don't hear the soundtrack when I'm going through, because I barely see the action because I'm concentrating on reading. I'm reading it like a novel, not as much watching it as a show. But I used to listen to the soundtrack all the time. So even thinking about the movie, I hear the opener, like the Ask DNA. I hear that in my head as I'm thinking about the movie starting up. That's how much I associate it.
I'll have to rewatch this film sometime soon to hear the theme a little bit more broadly. In fact, after I finally finish the series and this film, I will definitely be rechecking the theme out to maybe let you guys know by this next vlogcast.
Right.
So, but all in all, I think that the music went with the film, and I mean, it wasn't as diverse as the series had music for, but yeah, the production values were definitely a lot more in this production than there were in the series, and I think that's because of all the love that the series got, you know.
So I know that you probably have a lot more to say about these musical stuff than we do, Jake. So feel free to elaborate anything else on there.
Well, I don't really have much more at this time, honestly. I mean, we've said it's awesome. Let's see. And I have to admit, I've heard the main themes to the series so many times. They are completely in my DNA. But the movie themes, I'm not nearly as familiar with. So I can't really pick them out as easily. But I do know that, yes, especially that opening sequence and the closing, I think were both very effective, the way they married the music with everything else that was going on. Especially the animation for the opening sequence was really interesting. They were just like following people on the street, really, which is kind of an interesting approach. Yeah, it was good times.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and hit favorite scenes then? So, Dave, what's your favorite scene in this film?
I'll have to say my favorite scene was probably when Spike had taken off with that garbage truck and went to the pharmaceutical. What was it? The pharmaceutical? No, it was wherever Elektra was, and he ended up being a utility man. And when his confrontation with her, that was a pretty fun sequence. Especially the quid pro quo that he had with her. It was kind of like they were like somewhat. It's like she was angry. He was just making it look like it was all natural to him. I mean, she got a few hits in, but you know, mostly he was the superior fighter. So it was kind of neat that a neat fighting sequence with the cleaning utensil that he was using. So,
so how about you, Jake? What's your favorite in the movie?
I'm not sure that I have a clear favorite. I think we've already mentioned some of the ones I really enjoyed. Like, I really enjoyed when Faye coming back on the Bebop and everyone thinking she's got a disease and running away. And I enjoyed when she shot that thing and the guy just, the game getting, not getting where he wanted. And the whole part Dave was just talking about was really cool. And the part where the three guys actually got to see some action and do something rather than just talk. Thought those were all fun.
For me, it was the final confrontation between Spike and Vincent, especially since Vincent basically handed Spike his butt the first time they fought. Yeah. And Spike was able to come back, not necessarily beat him down, but you could tell that was a much more determined, much more high-stakes fight. And in a way, that was the high-stakes fight because he had to delay him. Not necessarily beat him, but he had to delay it just enough to keep them from to keep the people from dying. So I just thought that was really good. So with that being said, we're actually pretty good on time for once. And we kept this to about an hour. So I'm gonna, Jake, do you have anything else to say or?
No, just watch the movie and watch the series. It's awesome.
Well, even though they didn't really have any hand in this, I will still do shout outs because, again, I like the fact that these places do vote for the movies that we have. So I want to keep giving them good press. And of course, if you do join any of these Facebook groups, do let them know that we sent you over here at Inside Movies Galore. And of course, we've got Animazing Collections Incorporated, Movie Collectors, Moe's Tavern, and Talk Movies with Us. And they're celebrating a milestone with a whole bunch of new members on theirs. So that's pretty cool as well. So we got some really good people out there. But I'm going to then hand it over to Dave to finish us out and run us out.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to our jibber jabber on this animated film, and hopefully you enjoyed our chit chat on it. So thank you for listening. Have a great day, evening, or morning, wherever you are, and follow us over to our other channel where we discuss the 1994 film The Mask. So stay tuned for some exciting stuff. Thank you so much, and enjoy.
All right.
All right.